Good afternoon. I'm Kory Hall, the youth director here at Englewood United Methodist Church. Years ago, as I entered into ministry, I was taking over a youth ministry that was called Youth Group. This group had no name, no logo, and no identity other than Youth Group. So my first task was to give this group of mostly middle school students a name, an identity. I spent several weeks working with several other people on a name that had meaning, that was biblical, and that would be remembered. The name that we finally landed on was SWAT 412. Now, SWAT stands for Serving, Worshiping, Abiding, and Together. And the 412 is 1 Timothy 4:12. We had made the decision, but had not yet published it or told anyone about it. I was kind of having second thoughts about it myself, and maybe it just wasn't quite right. Maybe we should go with one of the other choices. Then one day, as I was talking on the phone and I was pacing back and forth on the sidewalk in front of the youth building, I noticed something written in the concrete on the edge of the sidewalk. I scuffed the dirt away with my foot, and I found these words. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. 1 Timothy 4:12 NIV. I took that as a pretty clear confirmation that we needed to be using that name and that Bible verse. You see, not only was I teaching students who were young in years and also young in faith, but I was young in youth ministry, and these words were important to me as well. In this letter from Paul to Timothy, we need to understand that most likely Timothy was in his late teens or early 20s at this point. Yet, even if Timothy had been 40 years old, his age would have been problematic for some. You see, not too many years after Paul had written this letter, writings known as the Apostolic Canons circulated through the early church, declaring that a man could not be appointed pastor until he was past 30 years of age, at which time he would be past his youthful disorders. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Or in the New King James, let no man despise your youth. Don't let anyone put this trip on you is what Paul's saying. I say, if you are young, 40, 25, 15, or even 12, don't let people say that you can't be used in ministry, that you can't be used in the work of the kingdom because you're too young. For now is the very time for you to get going, to get engaged, to get involved. I have noticed that as people get older, they no longer have the courage to step out because their lives become too complicated. All too often they say, first I have to take care of this and do that. But the years slip by and they miss out on so many opportunities. If the Lord has placed a calling within you, I encourage you to begin serving and ministering regardless of those who say, you don't know enough yet. Paul warned Timothy, there will be those who say you're too young. Don't argue with them, but instead be an example to them. Live your life in such a way that they will see there's something deep and rich about you. Paul then goes on to present 6 characteristics that would silence those who sought to criticize Timothy, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. It should come as no surprise that these 6 characteristics are seen most clearly in the life of the one who is our ultimate example, Jesus Christ. The account in Luke is the only one in the Bible that shows us Jesus as a young man. Yet in the one story we have, we see all 6 of these characteristics modeled perfectly. So be an example in word. Let's look at Luke 2:46. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Teenagers, notice that Jesus wasn't preaching to the elders in the temple? He was listening to them and asking questions of them. Let me suggest that if you want to be an example of the believer, your speech is to be based upon your listening to those who are older than you. But they don't know as much as I do, you may say. Don't you think Jesus knew more than those men in the temple? Yet he engaged in meaningful conversation with them for days. You who are younger than 40, be an example of the believer in speech by listening, by asking questions, and by engaging in meaningful conversation, because after he listened to them, he asked questions of them. Luke 2:47 goes on to say, everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. So be an example in conduct. Again, in Luke 2:46, after 3 days, they found him in the temple courts. Teenagers, if you were suddenly discovered to be missing, would mom and dad say, no doubt, he's at church? In your free time, where do you go? Jesus' lifestyle was centered around the temple, around things of the kingdom. It wasn't part of his life, it was his life. If as a 15-year-old you decide that church will have priority over volleyball, football, video games, social media, or watching TV, just watch and see how God will bless you as you seek first the kingdom. Be an example in love. Luke 2:48-50 says, when his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. Why were you searching for me? He asked. Didn't you know I would be in my father's house? But they didn't understand what he was saying to them. Of Joseph, Jesus could have said, he's not my dad. Instead, he corrected his mother so tenderly that neither she nor Joseph understood what he was saying. Jesus didn't say, let me clarify. He simply spoke the truth, and then he backed off. Mary and Joseph didn't understand, but Jesus didn't press his point. If you look at 2 Timothy 2:23-26, it says, well, we are not to compromise the truth, neither are we to cause strife, fight, or argue. We are to be gentle and patient. So be an example in spirit. Again, looking at Luke 2:49, why were you searching for me? He asked. Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house? As a teenager, Jesus didn't say, I'll try to be about my father's business. He didn't say, I should be about my father's business. He didn't say, I want to be about my father's business. He said, I must be about my father's business. And as an adult, he would say, I must go and preach the gospel in the kingdom, Luke 4:43. I must go through Samaria, John 4:4. I must be lifted up on the cross, John 3:14. Young man, young woman, be one who says, I must tithe, I must pray, I must serve faithfully, I must stay married, I must love my wife, I must love my husband. Show me a dad who says family devotions are not optional. Show me a teenager who says, if the game interferes with church, I'm not going to the game. Show me a man, a woman, a teenager, a married couple like that, and I'll show you people God will use profoundly. So be an example in faith. Luke 2:51. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. Jesus submitted himself to his mother and stepfather. It took faith to say, I'll choose to submit to you. Even though you don't understand what I'm saying, even though you don't fully realize who I am, I choose to submit myself to you because my Father in heaven has placed me in this home. And I have faith that he has ordained this to be. Whether at work or at home, in school or in a marriage, the key to submission is faith. The key to submission is saying, Lord, I know that you are on the throne, that you put me in this home, that you placed me in this position. Be an example in purity. Looking again at Luke 2:46. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts. Left alone in the city, Jesus kept himself pure. Although he was tempted in all points like we are, although he felt the same temptations and tugs of the flesh that we do, he didn't try to sneak into a movie. He remained in the temple. In his second letter, Paul will tell Timothy to flee youthful lust by hanging out with those who love God. 17-year-old, 23-year-old, listen to me. There are hot spots all over the place that will burn you out. Run from them and run to those who are gathering together to worship the Lord and study his word. Why should you be an example of the believers? Why should you follow the example of Jesus? Look at the last verse of Luke 2. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. If you choose to walk in humility, if you choose to walk in love, if you choose to walk in zeal and in faith and in purity, you'll increase in wisdom and you'll increase in stature and you'll grow in favor with God and man. The choice is yours. Amen. Have a great evening.